All right. Well, good morning to the folks on the West Coast. Good afternoon to my East Coasters. My name is Erica McAfee, and I'm going to present my research, my thesis capstone project, which is titled, Are You Listening to Me? Patient-Provider Relationships in Pregnancy and Post-Loss in Black Perinatal Bereavement. So we're going to go through an introduction, some specific aims, how I reviewed the literature, our methods. I'll talk about how I implemented this project and this research, the results. We'll go through some strengths and limitations, recommendations for future research, some next steps that I'll be taking on, references, and then I will end it with acknowledgements and your questions. And these pictures are a little slight flex. These are from last April, the first Black Maternal Health Roundtable that was held at the White House, where I had the privilege of sharing my story in front of Vice President Kamala Harris. So I want to start with an actual introduction using a video, and hopefully you all can hear this. My story began with baby loss. I lost a son at 39 weeks gestation, so I had a stillbirth. We went through the entire pregnancy with not major complications. Up until the end, I developed preeclampsia, high blood pressure, protein in my urine, and we lost him as soon as he was born via C-section. After that pregnancy, I went on to have another baby, get pregnant again, and I lost her at 18 weeks. So this was a part of a video that the BBC, based out of London, did on my organization. And it's the reason why I do the work that I'm doing and the basis of this research. So Black infants are 2.3 times more likely to die before their first birthday compared to our white counterparts. And Black American parents experience higher rates of fetal and perinatal deaths. So over the last 5 years, I have produced a show called Sisters in Loss, a podcast where Black women and their partners have shared their journeys to motherhood. And many of them shared that they weren't listened to or weren't heard during their treatment, during pregnancy and post-loss, that led to them having more difficult grief and bereavement journeys. So what ended up happening, a lot of this boiled down to transgenerational trauma that really was associated with over 400 years of collective enslavement, poverty, discrimination, in the educational system, in the judicial system, but more specifically in our healthcare system. So what we found in the research is that Black American parents really do encounter more specific barriers in receiving quality care. It could look like having some higher levels of medical mistrust that leads to the discrimination they're experiencing and just overall poor communication with their providers. However, there was not much known about how Black parents' perception about their impact with patient-provider relationships and their perinatal outcomes and their bereavement journey. So this study and this research really was aiming to really explore Black American mothers' experiences in pregnancy, loss, and bereavement in relation to the healthcare system, as well as their healthcare providers. So the specific aims of this research and this project really was to review the history and the role of our healthcare systems, as well as our healthcare providers in pregnancy and post-loss amongst Black American women, to also look at what the impact was of patient-provider relationships throughout pregnancy and post-loss, and really how Black American women cope with perinatal bereavement. How we went about this was to develop and administer focus groups, really to explore Black parental satisfaction, the perceived racial discrimination, and really any biases that could have been based on insurance status or social economic status. From there, we analyzed the focus group results and we made recommendations. The goal was to make recommendations for future improvement of patient-provider relationships in perinatal bereavement. So we went to the research, we went to the literature and really wanted to identify and really examine published articles that had already done research on healthcare providers and health systems in perinatal bereavement, really specifically among Black women. So we searched PubMed, or I searched PubMed, really without any restrictions. I really wanted to make sure that we looked at no language, no geography, really looking at articles from 2010 after. And we really looked at the key terms: perinatal loss, infant mortality, perinatal bereavement, patient-provider relationships, African-American, and pregnancy loss. And this search strategy resulted in less than 100 articles. So what the research showed is that Black American women really do experience fetal death at least twice those of any racial or ethnic group here in the United States. And no matter the gestational age of the loss, they still experience profound grief and mourning. Something else that the research showed was that that perinatal loss and bereavement is very unique to African Americans, mainly due to the lack of sensitivity that they experience from healthcare providers in grieving their loss. The research also showed that Black birthers and partners really were seeking providers that had active listening skills, that had the ability to ask probing questions and really to explain any diagnoses they had in lay terminology. The research also showed that healthcare professionals' communication was painful, disconnected, and uncomfortable for certain individuals. And participants reported a lack of continuity of care and communication after they received a terminal diagnosis. And then lastly, when it came to maternal mental health, one study identified that there was a lack of grief support groups that really were acknowledged or really prioritized by healthcare providers and health systems after individuals received bereavement or grief diagnoses. So what we did, or what I did in the methods was we actually decided to do focus group study for this research. And our target population was Black American women who've experienced perinatal loss in the first trimester, second trimester, or third trimester, had given birth here in the United States within the last 10 years. So our target sample size was to have at least 25 to 30 participants, mainly recruited from the Sisters-in-Laws community. We wanted to make sure that verbal consent was given, as these stories are sensitive and could be triggering. We did also provide the individuals opportunity to get connected with licensed mental health professionals. And then they also were provided a gift card for their participation. So how I went about making sure that we actually structured the study guide and interview questions, was really to focus on their pregnancy and post-loss experiences, how they communicated with their providers, the interactions they had with providers, their immediate actions that happened post-loss, and then the outcomes post-loss, any religion and spirituality, how that affected their overall grief and healing journey. So we recruited via the Sisters-in-Laws email listserv. We developed this flyer, emailed and solicited the community on Instagram, on social media, as well as in our private Facebook group. A total of 54 participants signed up, and we had a total of 24 participants in each of the different focus groups. So this resulted, mainly for this research study, in 15 participants that are included in this study in 3 focus groups, 1 for each trimester. The other 2 focus groups, so we had 5 total, were omitted from this study due to time constraints, and all participants identified as Black, African American, African, or Black American, and all identified as female. So this kind of gives you a breakdown of the 15 people who actually participated in this study. As you can see, it's a wide range of age, their marital status, whether they were employed or not, the time since their losses, as well as where their loss actually occurred, the actual setting of the time of loss and how they were broken down. So once this research, these focus groups were conducted, I used descriptor codes to actually analyze the actual transcripts from each of the different interviews. And each of these codes were broken down based on the interview questions that we developed. So we looked at, quotes around home life in pregnancy and post-loss, interactions with healthcare providers in pregnancy and post-loss, how they were treated in their healthcare settings after loss, were they being listened to and heard during pregnancy and post-loss? Were there any different outcomes that could have been based on their experiences? Any comfort or healing techniques that were discussed? And how religion and spirituality really played a role in their comfort and healing in their perinatal bereavement period. So the results around their interactions with the healthcare professionals, many of the focus group participants in their interactions with healthcare providers post-loss, they really felt like they were discriminated against and they weren't provided enough information to make an informed decision. Each of the focus group participants were given certain identifiers, and these are some of the quotes of some of the focus group participants. One focus group participant said that the doctor misdiagnosed her heartbeat with the fetal heartbeat. Another participant said that the doctor's bedside manners could have been better. And then another participant said that she didn't even want to question the doctor because she was a little fearful even of doing so. So what the focus group participants really shared in their interactions with healthcare professionals was that they felt like they weren't listened to overall, that really resulted in frustration and trauma. When it came to how they were treated in pregnancy and post-loss, it varied from positive to negative experience, from traumatic to grieving. One focus group participant said that they don't listen to Black women. They don't listen to women, especially Black women, because she was so traumatized. Another focus group participant said that traumatic had become the word that she attached to the experience. And another focus group participant said that even it was embarrassing leaving the hospital in a wheelchair like this, even with the box of mementos that she left, that they provided for her during her loss. So they felt like overall they were treated differently at some point during their post-loss experience. When it came to being listened to and heard, overall, participants felt listened to and heard during pregnancy and post-loss, mainly when they were talked to with understanding and comprehension of actually what was happening to them and to their babies. One participant said that they ignored her when she told them that she needed to push. Another participant said that silence isn't an agreement, and that she was so traumatized that she was silent, but that wasn't her agreement. She didn't know what questions to ask at the time. And another participant said that her degrees could not save her, her job could not save her. It boiled down to her just being another Black lady and another Black girl. So overall, despite many of them feeling discriminated against, some participants were not able to articulate or advocate for themselves due to the grief and trauma that they experienced and their interactions with healthcare professionals. When it came to different outcomes, a lot of the participants felt like their pregnancy and post-loss experience could have been handled differently with more care and attention from healthcare providers. One participant said that she felt like the medical staff just really could have given them more insight on exactly what was happening. Another participant mentioned that she felt like everyone gave up on her while she was going through her experience, her loss experience. And another participant said she wished she would have paid attention to more of the movements of her baby and the time that they did not move, and that would have helped her advocate for herself more and have possibly a different outcome. And lastly, when it came to religion and spirituality and what brought comfort and healing to our focus group participants, it really came in many forms. Many of the focus group participants felt like they leaned on family, the community, and therapy for support. One participant said that once she got into therapy, a lot of healing took place from that. Another participant mentioned that it pushed her further away from religion, the religion that she grew up in, but she eventually came back to that faith. And then a lot of the participants really talked about how finding community and hearing different women on the Sisters in Loss podcast really was helpful for them as they navigated through their journey. So many of them may have turned away from spiritual practices, but made their way back, or they leaned on other spiritual journeys or healing modalities really to provide them comfort on their healing journeys. So overall, our focus group responses were positive. To see each and every person on Zoom, they bonded over their shared experiences. The smiles, the grimaces, the head shakes, the nods, everyone left those conversations feeling a sense of community, but it also helped them normalize their loss experiences. Participants did share experiences that weren't pleasant or desirable, but even if they were positive, it still was traumatic. So some strengths of this research and this study was that this is the first known study that really explores the patient-provider relationships in pregnancy and post-loss for Black American women and birthing people. And it also touched on additional themes like lactation and bereavement, partners' grief responses, infertility challenges, mainly those who've experienced uterine fibroids, endometriosis, polycystic ovarian syndrome, and what pregnancy after loss looks like. Being listened to and heard in the medical system is fundamental to saving Black moms and babies. And from this study, that's what we found. But there also were some limitations of the study. It only included 15 out of the 24 participants due to the time constraints. I was only able to include 3 out of the 5 groups. And this content of the study was just limited to the focus group interviews as well as the literature. Provider responses weren't a specific aim of this study. So some recommendations for future research would be to actually ask the question around what is the provider response? How would the provider perspective be on communicating with Black American women during pregnancy and post-loss? How does the treatment of pregnancy and post-loss differ for Black American women in a pregnancy after loss? Another recommendation for future research would be how does religion and spirituality, particularly Christianity in the South, really help Black American women grieve and cope with perinatal loss? And as we're still in this COVID-19 pandemic endemic, really, how has COVID-19 and the pandemic really impacted Black American women's relationship with their providers during pregnancy and post-loss? So the next steps will be based on the preliminary findings of this was really to improve the communications between healthcare providers and Black American parents who have experienced perinatal loss and bereavement. This could look like providing training on communication around perinatal loss so they can know how to have those difficult conversations with bereaved parents, providing anti-racist training to healthcare providers that are involved in assisting with the childbirth process, because even though it's a loss, every loss is still a birth. Develop a formal procedure for that interpersonal management of perinatal loss. So, if someone comes in from the emergency room to the OR and the ER, they know exactly what to do in the OBGYN office. Creating a resource toolkit For bereaved parents, that includes, what does it look like to have lactation after birth, coping with partner grief, infertility challenges, and pregnancy after loss may look like. And for our healthcare providers to really avoid using jargon when communicating with bereaved parents overall, but Black American parents in particular. So the next steps for me is to conduct the analysis for all 5 focus groups. Obviously, this group was limited to just 3, so the additional participants, and to develop a patient provider protocol to be used for clinicians in hospitals and bereavement care facilities. I'm also going to be presenting this research once all 5 focus groups research is conducted. I'll be presenting this research here in Washington, D.C. in September of 2022 at the Black Mamas Matter Alliance Black Maternal Health Conference. So these are some references from some of the literature that we discussed today. And I want to thank you all for being here. Thank you all for being here, being a part of my community and village. To my advisory committee members, Christina and Wendy, thank you all for your guidance and mentorship throughout this process. My sisters-in-law's community, who continuously shows up and trusts me. Your support and sisterhood is everything. To my mother, my stepfather, Mr. Fred, all of my family and friends who are here, I love you all immensely. And the one that I do this for, which is the little guy picture here, who's in the other room asleep right now, my son, my angel on earth, Maxwell, he is the light of my life, and he's the reason why I continue to keep fighting for Black moms and babies. So with that being said, I'm going to open it up to questions. What questions do you have for me?
Thank you so much, Erica, for this wonderful presentation. If no one else has questions at this time, I am going to start by asking you what part of doing this project you liked the most. What was the best thing about doing this project?
The best thing was by far the focus groups. Actually being able to see the women in my community. Obviously you see them on social media and it's a virtual community, but to actually put names to faces and actually hear their stories more in depth reinvigorated me and made me want to do more of this research. So that was by far my favorite part. And then actually doing the analysis was fun. It was a lot of work, as you know, because you can't include everything, but there's so much rich conversations that were happening within all 5 focus groups, and it's hard to include everything in this research, but it just makes me understand that how important this work is and how much more data that we can pull from just the limited time that we had. So I really enjoyed that part of it as well.
Thank you so much, Erica.
You're welcome.
Tasha, I see your hand raised.
Hi, thank you. My name is Natasha Peterson. I am a student midwife with NMI. Thank you guys for the invite. I just wonder what when you were trying to get your individuals for the focus groups, how you reached out to people, like how did you find the parents? You might have said it, maybe I missed that part, but did you have a lot of participation? Was it hard to find people to participate in it? Like how did you go about finding those people?
Yeah, so I already have a online community, a private Facebook community and an online community through social media. And that led to, I already had a listserv of, an email list. So that's the list that I solicited to gather the participants. So I didn't really have to go outside of kind of my own personal listserv, since I already have people who listen to the podcast, who are part of my grief support groups. And those are the folks who trusted me to when I asked for, folks who wanted to participate and be interviewed, they trusted me to come and sign up and show up. So it wasn't hard for me to recruit, which I know it's probably maybe more difficult for other people to get people who are more specific, especially on their target population. Since the target population was my community, I just reached out to them and they responded without any hesitation. Thank you for the question.
Does anyone else have other questions at this time?
I just wanted to say thank you for your presentation, and I'm also a student and learning about all of the different facets that we can notice and be more nuanced about, and just continue to be more detailed and specific. And so yeah, I just really appreciate hearing your presentation, and I hope that your work continues to benefit all of the people whose lives you're a part of. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate
that. Erica, there's a question in the chat from Natasha. Can we get information on the conference in September?
Yes.
Kristen says she's going to post it in a moment.
Yes, blackmamasmatter.org. You can click on the Black Maternal Health Conference link. If registration is currently open for that conference, there's a virtual option as well as an in-person option. If you want to come on down to our nation's capital, come to DC and be a part of the conference. Yes. I'm also presenting at that conference as well, not only just this research, but I'm also presenting on perinatal bereavement for Black mothers. So two types of presenting at the conference.
Tanya.
Yeah, Erica, fabulous project, fabulous work, fabulous presentation all around. You mentioned in the beginning testifying at the Black Maternal Health Caucus, and I just wondered if are there opportunities for you to continue to work with the Black Maternal Health Caucus?
Absolutely. A lot of the work that we've partnered with this year with Black Mamas Matter Alliance has led me to be out and doing more work with a lot of the legislation that's happening here in DC. So yes, the partnerships with the Black Mamas Matter Alliance, as well as the National Birth Equity Collaborative, and Sister Song have led to other opportunities to get in front of some of the legislators around Build Back Better bill, as well as all of the different bills under the Omnibus Act. So I'm excited about just opportunities to really talk more about perinatal loss, perinatal bereavement, and what we can do to really talk about maternal mental health from a grief and loss perspective.
Thank you. That's exciting.
Yes, very exciting.
and so lovely that now before you had your story and your work, and now you also have this actual body of work of scholarly work in addition to add to what you can do out there in the world.
Absolutely, that's exciting. Yes, absolutely. Thank you.